Hi, Monica. Happy to have you on board. Monica is the head of content at the ICPS Institute, but today she will talk about a subject that's very, I would say, in the flow of what Vince has as a subject, financial inclusion. And we talked about digital identity, the possibilities that decentralized blockchains will have, digital identity, information flows. But one of the main things is that we got 3.2 billion people on this planet who are underbanked or non-banked at all. And if you don't have access to economic systems, it's one of the major problems the United Nations tries to fix. You'll never have economic prosperity, you won't have economic diversity, and you will basically have a bigger gap as you go between, I would say, less privileged countries and countries that have benefited from the Industrial Revolution way back from the 19th century. So Monica is really a tech evangelist. Like our former guest, she's already in this area of blockchain development since 2013, so quite a few years. I mean, in blockchain, 5 years is a long period, we know that. She's been overseas, she's been on cutting edge subjects. What the bridge is between her and Vincent is that Vince is, very much involved in all sorts of regulatory issues. And Monica actually served within the London area in regulatory and compliance issues to get, technology businesses furthered along in their development. So Monica, welcome to you. I am looking forward to your speech. Hello. So I give the floor to you. And Monica is very big in virtual training courses. So what I also like is that from digital identity, digital information, we now go to actually giving people the opportunity to learn, which is basically what you're involved in a lot of the time. I know that. So we're looking forward to your contribution.
Sure. So yes, of course, I'm Monica, and it's great that we've got an audience today who are engaged in the subject of the decentralization of finance and the democratization of finance. I think, you hit it on the head. Across the world at the moment, women face a variety of hurdles, and some of them seem quite insurmountable, and they are stifling their potential to, I suppose, be fully engaged in the formal economy. So the formal economy, I mean, on a daily basis, men run businesses, they engage in commercial activities, business meetings, and of course you've got smaller companies that might be just a family member and a son. And you have the informal vendors in the markets. And if you go to Ghana or Vietnam, wherever in the world, you will find that a majority of informal vendors are women and they are cash rich. And they keep their money under the bed. That's the funny thing. They keep the money under the bed and they don't trust banks. And even if they were to go into banks, a lot of the time they don't meet the criteria to open up a bank account. And it's not just about not having an audit trail or proof to open up a bank account. It's also just general prejudice as well. Informal vendors are from a certain category in society, and so you have all these preconceived notions about informal vendors and whether they are trustworthy and whether they can meet their loan payments. But I think, given that the Grameen model in Bangladesh worked exceptionally well, and if you look at the Bangladesh case, the GDP is pretty strong at the moment, and they have gone from giving microloans to informal vendors, female, to bigger loans for small, medium-sized enterprises, and now they're bringing women into technology. So I think we can use Bangladesh as a great case study for bringing the unbanked women into the formal economy and overcoming the hurdles. So you mentioned the 3 billion figure of unbanked people in Asia. I believe 1 billion of that figure is women and females. And I remember reading a case study the other day in Kenya, actually. They were giving out, it was similar to UBI, Universal Basic Income. they were giving out money to various people within a small town in Kenya, and this study had been going on for quite a few years, and the outcome and the results of the study were that the women had used that money to build small businesses, but they also used it to improve their environments, and they also sponsored other families and gave out small loans. Unfortunately, with the men, they stopped giving them the money because unfortunately they were spending it on things like alcohol and other things that weren't really kind of useful for the community. So I think we need to bear in mind that women play a big role in community stewardship, environmental stewardship, as well as being informal vendors in markets and owning SMEs. So if we lump that all together, in places like Ghana and Vietnam, what you'll find is that it will have a kind of knock-on effect, and that knock-on effect helps GDP, helps the community, and it helps with well-being indices. So it's really important that we get the unbanked together, and not only the UN, but for fintech companies and blockchain companies and companies that provide digital wallets to do basic transfers on a basic phone is so important right now, because especially with the pandemic, I think it's even more pressing to get the unbanked in the formal economy that will add to countries' GDPs.
I'm getting back on, Monica. Technology is a bit letting me down. I think it's very interesting what you just told us about the influential role of women in, I would say, underbanked societies like Vietnam and Ghana. I've been to Africa myself. I know that a lot of these SMEs culturally, because of their, the whole flow in the community, is really resting on the women to provide the income from the families. How do you see the possibilities of fintech to really have a contribution? Is that just having the availability to transfer funds or value through a mobile phone, or do you see other possibilities for fintech?
I think the key thing at the moment is that we need to accept that people are establishing digital banks, and they will grab the market share from the traditional banks who've been slow moving and not agile enough to respond. I mean, they're still talking about it, but with digital banks, there's a lot of ease with onboarding, less paperwork, and I think their appetite for risk is bigger. And so I believe that even for example, here in the UK, we have Starling Bank, who's I think the founder is a woman. So she's particularly interested in onboarding female business owners and those who own SMEs. So I think digital banks are going to be the way forward. I would say that the large banks are going to be laggards, and they're going to be slow moving, and because of their legacy systems and tighter controls on compliance, AML, KYC, it's going to be a struggle. So I think digital banks are going to lead the way. I think they're the ones that are going to really make a difference, and I'm seeing lots of digital banks popping up in many places.
Do you think it's going to help fight? I mean, we know that many of these currencies are relatively small in volume. The GDP that's backing the currency is often struggling, and especially now with COVID-19. Do you see that the role of some of these currency systems will be taken over by digital coins, in the sense, whatever, I'm not specifically referring to anything, but I mean, there is a lot of inflation, a lot of insecurity. We all know the effect M-Pesa had in Africa, how do you see this developing? Is it going to be a major difference?
I think, it's definitely developing, and I think people in banking and finance are watching and observing and taking note Obviously, Africa is fresh territory for establishing digital currencies, whether they're backed by stable coins or not. And they have less legacy systems, less, or I should say, more agile infrastructure, ICT infrastructure. So they will probably, I think in Africa, it will probably be the spearhead or the leader in terms of establishing digital currencies. So yes, M-Pesa has been great. I have a friend who set up a company called Market Without Borders for refugee women from Uganda who were based in Kenya, and they were making these amazing crafts and jewelry, but they couldn't be paid by Etsy. So she set up a blockchain so that she could pay them in digital currencies, and these women, these refugee women, have a livelihood now. So it's real case studies like that that's kind of developing, and I think most of the banks and the central financial institutions, they're watching and they're quite surprised at the outcome, and it's an exciting time, I think.
I'm a great fan of digital currencies for societies like that, because the transferability, if you got no bank, you got nothing else to go to do your payments, the only thing that's going to work is to have something simple that works on a refurbished phone. I mean, they don't buy Apple 10X in Africa. So, I see a great future for that. I'm a big advocate of having simple solutions for this, for value transfer. What I see is that there are a lot of, I wouldn't say they're small, but there are, I would say, isolated projects that are very, very successful, like the one you just mentioned. What I'm sort of anticipating is at some point there is going to be a snowball effect if some things come together, that 1 and 1 is not just 2, but it's going to be 5. So if we look at the current, things in France, like experimenting with the digital euro, with some other things, I would say the old economy banks trying to get a bit of the action in there. What do you see in the near future for mainly Africa? Because Africa is, of course, I mean, we copper wired whole of Europe. They don't need to do that. They just have their masts, and they need to invest way less in their infrastructure as we had to do over all these decades that we developed the technology. They hop on just on the latest stage, which is probably going to be even 5G. So what do you see as the, I would say, the catalyst of this snowball effect? Because I have a strong sense there is going to be something like this. It can't be that all these individual projects, like development of women in Bangladesh, these payment systems that are still on a larger scale, they're just a drop in the ocean still, each individually. What do you see could be a catalyst to just make this combination and to snowball this?
I think the African Union, the AU, they've set up a special framework for digital banking. I'm in the Telegram group for that, and they've made some real considerable progress. I think that it's going to take some time. We can't expect these things to happen very quickly because Africa is vast, and each country within Africa is different, and based on geopolitics or who they're aligned with, sometimes it's difficult to push through the benefits of digital banking and digital currencies when there's pressure from perhaps mining companies, oil companies to continue with the traditional way of doing things. But they're definitely setting up a framework, so that's definitely a positive thing. And actually, I was talking to my friend the other day who's based up in northeastern Kenya, Wajir, and he's involved in a fintech company. Apparently, Somalia, which is unrecognized by the UN, it's a very cash-based economy, and they're very cash-rich. And a lot of them are banned from sending money because of the terrorist, counter-terrorist finance laws. So they're now setting up something for themselves, not just for Somalia, but the Somalians that live in Kenya and those that are in Ethiopia. And so they're doing it amongst themselves. They don't have time to wait for regional bodies or larger entities to move. They're doing it, and this is grassroots, and they're doing it from the ground upwards.
It sounds like a real development. You know, I'm a big advocate, and Vince knows that, of the Sustainable Development Goals. I know that the United Nations sees blockchain-based technology as a major way to improve things in that area because it's non-corruptible, and you basically have the airdrop possibility of giving people directly to the source means or tokens, and there's lots of development in that area. I really want to thank you for this insight, especially because I appreciate the female angle. Can't help it, guys. Sorry. You know, the female angle. When I started in IT, I basically spent years without engaging with any other female in the business. So I'm really happy that these women are empowering themselves with digital currencies, with blockchain-based systems, however tiny, however small, like in Somalia or Bangladesh. But especially in these societies where the traditional systems have kept them, I would say, out of the main economic drive, for which they're very important, especially for the education of the next generation. So Monica, thank you so much for attending. I hope we'll see some more of you because I'm highly interested in what you're doing.